Hi, I'm Ronette Riley. I'm an architect in New York City, and you're listening to US Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Modernism Week in Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival, and for the last 5 years, US Modernist has been there interviewing nearly all of Modernism Week's keynote speakers, plus special guests at the US Modernist compound, aka Poolside, at the hip Hotel Skylark in Palm Springs. Most Americans have not been to Australia, although a surprising number of Australians have traveled to America. Today, George Smart and I talk with 4 Aussies among the 50 or so that came to Palm Springs this past February during Mod Week. They are Annie Price, Jamie Paterson, and Rachel Jackson, and then we wrap up with a great friend of the show, Ms. Modernism herself, Annalisa Capurro of Sydney. For me, coming to Modernism Week with George is an affirmation that he's not just making all this fun stuff up. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, but being among bona fide fans of mid-century modern design and architecture helps me understand the passion that brings so many people out to places like the Glass House in Connecticut, Falling Water in Pennsylvania, and Taliesin West in Arizona, and Palm Springs, California. It's a whole different world out there, and these days, who doesn't want that?
Well, thank you, Tom. You know, one man's passion is another man's OCD, so there is that. If you are into mid-century modern, Modernism Week is a joyous, all-you-can-view festival of mid-century architecture. Lectures, martinis, art galleries, fantastic shopping, nonprofit benefit events, architecture documentary premieres, and amazing parties at brilliantly curated house tours and evening events, and much more. For me, a highlight is riding out to Rancho Mirage. Rancho Mirage is kind of the Beverly Hills area of the whole valley. Big estates, huge houses, most of them modernist, large with big pools, on meticulously cared-for grounds near golf courses.
And none of them are mirages, despite the name.
Right. No, they're all real. They're all there. And that part of the valley is also where you see major golf tournaments. You see major tennis tournaments coming there every year. It's a pretty incredible place if you've got, a couple of extra mil to spend on your vacation home. If you want to go with us to Modernism Week in February 2021 and stay at the US Modernist compound, email me at george@usmodernist.org. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/USModernist and by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In a caper we are kind of making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll was born in Monte Carlo, the love child of a Brazilian heiress and her Italian driver, Sergio. Sent to boarding school in the Alps, she snuck out at night to bartend at the 5-star resort in Vaal, Switzerland. It was there, in the Peter Zumthor-designed thermal spa, steaming in the November chill, that she overheard a detailed conversation. It was between Stavros Pedikov, a wealthy Russian, planning a modernist Paris hotel, and the famous international architect Jean Nouvel. Inspired, she whipped up a better hotel design on a bar napkin, which she gave to Pedikov, and guess what? It won the commission. Nouvel, however, was furious and in his rage turned to a life of crime as Dr. Evil in the Austin Powers movies. Yes, you've seen them, and the resemblance is uncanny. 18 months later at the hotel opening, Nouvel took a cue from the Three Stooges and secretly managed to place hundreds of banana peels in the new hotel rooms. Scores of people were injured and Angela was taken to court. Taking the Channel to London, she hired a barrister, Eric of Windsor. He successfully fought the charges on appeal. And they got married next year. She moved to America to become a formidable real estate agent with modernist architecture training for buyers and sellers of modernist houses. Angela Roll is your special agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL or 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Angela. When you come with us to Palm Springs, and I hope you will, there's no better crowd to hang out with than the amazing Australian delegation. They travel halfway around the world every year to celebrate modernism and share their own incredibly impressive collection of modernist architecture from architects such as Harry Seidler, Robin Boyd, Russell Jack, Glenn Murcutt, and Britt Anderson. Annie Price is Vice President of Beaumaris Modern, a nonprofit organization preserving the mid-century architecture of the Beaumaris area of Melbourne, Australia. Jamie Paterson is the operations manager of the Robin Boyd Foundation and also a founder of Beaumaris Modern. Rachel Jackson is with GML Heritage, one of Australia's leading historic preservation consultants based in the capital, Canberra. And we wrap up with a great friend of the show, Ms. Modernism herself, Annalisa Capurro of Sydney. Let's go poolside now to the U.S. Modernist compound in Palm Springs. When I first came to Modernism Week, I just didn't know what to expect. I mean, you have the houses and the martinis, and you have the films and the lectures. But then there were the Australians, and they just seemed to be everywhere. You would go into a room, and there would be at least 2 Australians, and you could tell because of the tempo and the volume of what was going on. And they were always the most enthusiastic people. And this has only gotten worse here in Palm Springs because there are more Australians coming here than ever.
Yep.
Making the, 14-hour voyage, basically, in the plane to L.A., and then driving over here, I guess, from there. Is that how it works?
Yeah, yep.
So let's start out talking about your neighborhood. Beaumaris, is that how you say it?
Beaumaris.
Beaumaris.
We've had a lot of people ask us how to pronounce it, actually, so we've addressed that in the talk we're doing tomorrow. It's Beaumaris, and it's a bayside suburb of Melbourne, about,
20 kilometres south from the
20K,
city.
Yep. And we're
Which
on
is 15 mile, perhaps, in the American vernacular.
Yeah.
We're still working on metric here. We tried it in the 70s, and it never stuck. But and at least when you go to the Whole Foods grocery store, you can buy things in metric now.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
in a lot of
We haven't
places.
noticed that. We'll
Yeah.
have to look out. Yeah, so we're on a little peninsula, very sandy little area of Melbourne by the bay, a peninsula called Ricketts Point. And we are quite lucky with our suburb that there is no train line there. So it's relatively quiet and peaceful. You isn't it? You have to be going there to see someone rather than passing through. So it's lovely and quiet.
What were some of the architects that worked in your neighborhood?
Well, we had a lot of Australia's now renowned architects were young at the time and experimenting with their first homes there and building there. So we had the likes of Robin Boyd, Charles Patrick,
Anatole Kagan, Mockridge, Staley and Mitchell.
Yeah.
Many more names.
Yeah, the list goes on.
Peter McIntyre was another one. And it was quite fortunate that most of the land of Beaumaris was owned by the Dunlop Rubber Company during the war years. And they had planned to build a factory and boulevards of workers' cottages as a utopian garden city. And with the end of the war and the shortages and then the global price of rubber fell, the land was sold off and was subdivided. And it was quite unique because it was relatively close to the city and by the bay. And it really opened up this land for young professionals, for
very creative people.
A lot of creative people.
Yeah.
There was already a strong artistic movement in the area. A lot of Australia's groundbreaking artists had previously worked in the area. So there's an artistic school called the Heidelberg School, which features many of Australia's particularly watercolour painters. And it really drew a lot of creative people to the area.
And how long have you lived there, Annie?
We've lived there, so Jamie and we bought in
2010.
2010, yes, and we've renovated a mid-century home ourselves, and I guess that's what got us so involved and so passionate about the era. And Beaumaris does have an unusually high concentration of mid-century homes because of that time around the 50s and 60s when those architects were drawn to the suburban building. Yeah.
Now, over the decades, has the neighborhood had like tours of itself where every couple of years has it done that kind of thing?
Well, only over the last 3 years through our group, Beaumaris Modern.
Right.
There was a walking tour on a council pamphlet a little earlier than 3 years ago, but that's about it. And since we've become part of Beaumaris Modern, we've been taking a lot of inspiration from Palm Springs and the various preservation societies here and started to run our own open house days, walking tours, guided walking tours, panellist events. We do some events with the National Trust of Australia's Heritage Festival. So we've sort of started a lot of those things up in our suburb, which is really exciting.
And I assume you've heard of Holland Hills in Virginia?
No.
So Holland Hills is a community that is similar to what you're doing, and they have organized themselves into a once every 2 years open house where probably 1,000 people will come over the course of a weekend.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
And it's very structured, and the whole neighborhood gets behind it. We're taking a group up there this year.
Amazing.
Of about 30, 35 people.
Had you heard of that?
On the bucket
No, I
list
think only through your podcast.
Holland Hills, yes.
Okay.
All right, so Rachel, you are here from Canberra. Am I saying that correctly?
You almost got it.
Almost? Tell me again.
But I like your accent on
Canberra?
Canberra.
Canberra.
That's correct.
Canberra.
Throw away the last bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Canberra. Like a little Scottish in there.
Yes, now you've got to roll on the R. I am from Canberra, but like many people from Canberra, they've come from somewhere else.
Yes.
And I came from Sydney. I grew up in Sydney, but find Canberra a very special place and have stayed there for 20 years.
Well, I didn't know, I guess until a year or two ago, that Canberra was a designed city, that there were architects involved. It was the Griffins, correct?
Yeah. Walter Burley Griffin.
So tell us
Marion
about
Marnie
that
Griffin.
story a little bit, because not many cities are designed within recent memory.
I know, this is the really important thing about Canberra. It is a design city, and it's should be internationally renowned, like Brasilia, like Washington, D.C. It's really, from the turn of the 20th century, the Griffins won an international design competition to design the capital of Australia, the national capital of Australia.
Yeah.
And that they were successful in that, but they were a little bit out there. They had modern ideals, and they came from America. They worked with Frank Lloyd Wright. They were really prairie school architects and landscape architects, but they appreciated nature and the environment. And Canberra it's called the bush capital, because this design city is within a beautiful environment of lovely hills and views to mountains that have snow on them in the winter. So it's actually quite a gorgeous place.
Much like Palm Springs.
Much like Palm Springs.
Yeah.
But it languished the development of the city as a kind of government city, and getting people from the major cities like Sydney and Melbourne to live in Canberra, which was essentially a sheep station on a river, and no money during the world wars between World War I and World War II, and there's a depression. Nothing really happened there, and the government agencies all worked from Sydney and Melbourne, but it took a post-war sort of World War II optimism and bravery to move the government to say, right, we're going to build this city now and populate it. An intense population boom happened through government instigation of saying we have to have a national capital. It can't be half here and half there. It has to be in this city that was established in 1912. So quite a fascinating history in that regard.
And did your city go through a kind of modernist renaissance like Melbourne did in the 50s and 60s with houses?
Absolutely. It is. The two phases of development is the 1920s, and then it really didn't get developed until the 1950s, 60s. So there's those two layers. So it's the modernist ideals of housing and how we lived is throughout Canberra's newer suburbs, which are newer when I say 1950s,
right,
from a National Capital Development Commission to design and build and populate. So it's really a community-centred city around different suburbs, and it's a significant place really for that reason. It has modernist ideals in the way we live and experience our environment.
Here's a pop-up question for all three of you. Here in America anyway, when we went through our great modernist renaissance, there was such great optimism about the future. People thought the future was going to be fantastic. We were going to have flying cars and two-way wrist radios, and George Jetson was going to take his little space vehicle to work.
Yes.
And in the United States now, it seems like because of politics and other things, a lot of people are not looking forward to the future. The future is bad and dark, and people are going to hurt us and kill us and everything else like that. And this wide-eyed optimism is largely gone, except maybe, during Modernism Week. How is it in Australia and in your country? Do you have some of that same kind of dynamic?
Well, the reason we're here is because we need to encourage our own community to love that modernist ideal and say, this is the future. And we don't, if we want to be sustainable, we need to protect and look after what we've got. That's the essential character of Canberra for sure, and Beaumaris.
Yeah. And other parts of Australia.
Other parts of Australia.
Well, our major cities are facing tremendous growth. Sydney and Melbourne both pushing 5 million people and are still growing at something like 7% per year. So Melbourne is slated to have another 500,000 people by 2030.
Wow.
So we have tremendous challenges within our urban environments with how to sustainably continue that development.
Yeah.
And I think part of the challenges that we have, particularly in suburbs like Beaumaris, is the existing residents, and the reason why people want to move into the suburb is because it's quiet. It has well-proportioned houses on comfortably sized blocks. It's by the water, but the increasing population pressure means that developers are looking at putting 2, 3, 4 houses on one block and changing the dynamic of the suburb. So we've got a lot of competing interests. On one hand, we have, as I said, the existing residents who love it how it is. On the other hand, we have a real crisis with housing. It's very difficult for young people to get into the market, and therefore cheaper, more affordable housing is also a need. So we've got to balance those needs, and we also need to preserve some of our heritage and our history.
So what's the attitude in your neighborhood about accessory dwelling units or mother-in-law buildings? I mean, because we're seeing here in America that some neighborhoods are really embracing this for any number of reasons, for helping with housing, for adding to the value of their home, and then other neighborhoods are just wildly against it.
That happens in Canberra too. We're really trying to say the message: retain what you've got for that character and adapt what you have. Don't overdevelop it because you'll lose that.
And I think the other
character.
thing is, unfortunately, a lot of the new builds, when you look at the cleverness that these architects had in the 50s and 60s, and it was fueled by this optimism because the war was over, but there was also so much cleverness in what they did because they placed the house on the block to capture the sun, to harness the sun, to get the best light, etc., etc. And now it seems we've forgotten all those basic principles, and we just stick these new buildings up with tiny little windows and turn our air conditioners on inside to keep them cool. And there's just a lack of respect for the land and the environment and how we're building these homes. And so that's really sad. And I think that apart from preserving and trying to save what we have for future generations, we also need to look at stronger rules and regulations around what we build, because there's nothing wrong with new builds. They just have to be done well and in character with the suburb.
Have your land values gone up to such an extent that it makes McMansions more attractive?
Well, that's part of the problem.
That's a massive part of the problem.
Australia has had a massive property boom that's really gone unabated now for well over 20 years in the capital cities. The land prices are continually rising, and that's partly because of government policy. So a number of policies, including grants to first home buyers, the way the taxation system works with property, fueling a lot of investment in second, third, fourth houses. So there's really a structural correction that needs to be made with land values. We saw a little dip in that about a year or two ago, but the government then further stimulated the property market. So at some point there definitely needs to be a reevaluation of the taxation and the government assistance that fuels the ever-growing house
And that's
prices.
so easy to do, right? The consensus is just right there to change that
That's
system
right.
so quickly.
Yeah, unfortunately, populism, is infecting politics around the world, and Australia's not immune to populism either.
And interesting, that land value question, and Canberra is only just approaching 500,000 in our population. It's very, very small, but we're intensifying development in the historic core of the city, of the design city, with apartment buildings where we've got the space, and people really need to, if we want to be optimistic about the future, we should be keeping that open space around our buildings and not, medium density, fine, go for it. But high density in historic cores, there's a contradiction there. We don't need it. We don't need it.
So Rachel, tell us about your organization, which is relatively new.
Relatively new, yeah. We're sort of alongside Beaumaris Modern, but in being new, and together we work well. But Canberra Modern there's three of us, Amy Jarvis, Edwina Jans and myself. And we are all heritage professionals in our day job, and Canberra Modern is our side hustle. But in our work, we can see the impact of unprotected development in a way, and we've decided to take it to a community level to say this is what we've got that's special. So we put on events through the Heritage Festival every year, and we put on events throughout the year just to engage people, community participation, much like Palm Springs, where engage people in what they might love about it, but not from an academic architectural perspective. And it can be the lifestyle that's important, and that is what our mandate is, community participation. And we hope, it has the longevity of conservation alongside that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So
they're dynamos. The three girls on Canberra Modern. We've got 12 on our committee, and we look at what these three do, and we just like how they do it. They're
Amy was on our show last year.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
So.
Yes, and she's finished her Churchill Fellowship and received the fellowship.
Oh, nice!
Celebrating the past, in the present, for the future. And
what a great
heritage
title.
Advocacy, engagement and tourism models for modernist places and spaces. So coming here for your podcast, she was in the thick of that Churchill Fellowship of learning about heritage advocacy in an American model. So,
George, the tourism aspect is something that we're also focusing on with our local council. It's a massive opportunity, again, inspired by our experiences here in Palm Springs and exploring other mid-century enclaves around the world. We have a unique product, if you like, in that we have a wonderful heritage, we have some great stories to tell around that, the architects, the builders, the original homeowners, and we are trying to work with our local council to form that into a marketable tourism product. And we think that's a very important component to advocacy. First, you have to celebrate and educate your community, and then you have to show them a vision of how this can benefit the community. And tourism, as we see with Palm Springs, this festival started with 3 events, and I think 1,500 people attended. Look at it now, it's over 150,000 people, 50 odd million to the local community, local economy every year. So that's really the vision that we're painting to our community and our council.
Now, how do you guys go about documenting the houses?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and we need to continue getting better at that, I think, because we have a book that was released last year, Beaumaris Modern, which was written by the president of our group, Fiona Austin, who's here with us. So the book has done incredibly well. It's on its second print run, and I think she's working on a second book. We have an archive section of our website where we try to list every significant home, whether it's by a well-known architect or not. And we're constantly updating that with the status, whether it's still standing or demolished. We need to keep working on that archive and building that. And we also do want to do a lot more work recording, the owners or the original builders and architects of these homes.
That's very important.
Very important, because we were lucky enough to meet the builder of our home, designer of our home, who's 94, so it was wonderful to talk to him, and we may not get that chance again.
Have you done a video of him yet?
No, and that's...
So when you get home,
I know.
just take your phone,
Yeah.
don't make this fancy,
No.
and get it done.
I remember your advice, and we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing with recording and telling stories of these amazing houses is that, of course, many of them are coming up for sale in recent years, and that's really how Beaumaris Modern kicked off, is that Fiona had a Facebook site. Local mid-century homes came onto the market. She promoted them. She was almost like a second tier of promotion above the real estate agent. And when we formed our community association, we took that to the next level so that we now work with all the local estate agents. We have a database. We actively promote the properties to people who are, I guess, queued up looking for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've had some wonderful success stories in the last couple of years with houses that, were under threat of demolition or purchased by a developer seeking the land for a larger development. And we've been able to marry those wonderful homes with younger families who
That's right.
house size and the lifestyle is perfect for. And that's a wonderful element to advocacy, is to just promote the lifestyle of these wonderful homes, what can be done with them, match them up with renovation professionals or architects, and give these homes a new life.
Yep.
So, Rachel, how can people reach your organization if they want to know more when they're flying into the capital of Australia?
You just have to look up Canberra Modern and you'll find us. We're up the top there. That's how they reach us, through our website. We have Instagram and Facebook. So, there's an email address if they want to tell us about their stories about Canberra, or how they want to be involved. As there's 3 of us, but we have a lot of interested parties and volunteers who work with us at our events, and they are just wonderful. And we love that because we hear everyone's stories and what they love about Canberra too. So it's a good way of connecting. And like you say, we should just be recording all these people.
Oh yeah, we've recorded 50, I guess, just within North Carolina.
Wow.
And I would say at least 30 of them have died since we recorded.
Oh, boy.
So the joke around all the old guys was, if George Smart comes to see you, check your insurance plan.
Oh, dear. You're the kiss of death, are you, George? The kiss of death.
My parents are both architects, so, you inherit this sort of stuff, and you do want to pass it on. It's so important.
Oh, yeah.
It is,
What we keep advising people is that, don't worry about production values for this stuff.
No.
Just, because it's better to be a year too early than 5 minutes too late.
Absolutely. It's a very, very important lesson there,
Well, George, I guess part of the pleasurable journey that we've been on in the past few years, and connecting with people like Rachel and Canberra Modern, is also connecting with many of the other groups and individuals in the mid-century modern appreciation space. So I was fortunate enough last year to be offered a role with the Robin Boyd Foundation. Robin Boyd was...
well-known architect?
Perhaps Australia's most well-known modernist architect, but he was so much more than an architect. He was a prolific writer. He was really the first architect who Australians saw on television and heard on radio, and he was an avid social critic, but also an incredible promoter of Australian design and Australian identity.
Yes.
So the Boyd Foundation not only are caretakers of the Boyd 2 House, otherwise known as Walsh Street, which is one of Australia's most significant mid-century homes, which is actually open for public tour. But we also are an incubator of discussion on design, both reflecting the ideals of modernism, but also contemporary design. So we have a unique group of leading architects who have formed a grouping called the Boyd Circle, who regularly have events at our Walsh Street house talking about contemporary design, and bringing a lot of speakers in from overseas as well.
Well, that is so cool. I want to thank the three of you for stopping by the swanky Hotel Skylark
Thanks for having us.
with our built-in background pool noises. No extra charge for those.
Oh, we can jump in after?
Yes,
too?
you certainly can.
Okay, thank you.
But I hope that you'll come back again to Modernism Week. You'll find that this experience is very habit-forming. This is my
It is.
6th or 7th time.
It's our third.
coming.
Yep.
And next
Yep.
week, I will start planning for next year.
Amazing.
So every time that I learn more about Australia, I just appreciate the experience. So I hope to hear more about what you guys are doing and anything we can do to help your events
Thank you.
or like that.
We'd
please
like
let me
to.
know.
We'd like to publicly invite you
Absolutely.
to
Really?
Australia.
Okay.
Absolutely,
Please.
yes. Please come to our events, and we can do
Okay.
go between our states and
Yep.
major cities.
Oh, we'd love
Oh,
to
that'd
have
be
you,
fun.
George.
We'd love
Yeah,
to
yeah.
take
Do
you for
more.
a tour around some of our
Yeah.
mid-century precincts and
Yeah.
show you some of our wonderful homes.
We'll be the second biggest thing to Oprah when she came years ago and
Oh, yes.
made that big splash.
That's
She
right.
took 2 plane loads of
Oh my goodness.
people around Australia. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Because it made the news around the entire
Yeah.
planet.
I think Oprah
Well,
always
yeah.
makes
Yeah.
the news.
George Smart can make the news next time.
Is,
Yeah.
is,
Come on.
is Oprah into mid-century? Do we?
No, as far as I know, not at all.
We
Oh,
like
that's
to
a
connect
shame.
people.
She's got this big Santa Barbara sort of Spanish estate thing
Okay,
going
I can
on.
picture that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
All
what
right.
about Leonardo DiCaprio? Maybe he can come along with you too.
Yes, do you want to
Yes.
bring him along?
Yes, of course, Leonardo and I just like this. Yeah.
Okay.
That was George Smart visiting with 3 Australians from Modernism Week, Annie Price, Jamie Paterson, and Rachel Jackson. And now, a moment of reflection from Nietzsche.
Beauty, love, durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good, and you love feeling this good. Nietzsche, 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 Nietzsche. Say it with me. Nietzsche. Advanced engineering. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nietzsche.com/USModernist. Nietzsche, Nietzsche, Nietzsche. That's NICH. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nietzsche.
One of the best things about going to Modernism Week is that I get to spend time with educator, designer, and preservationist Annalisa Capurro. She is just the best. Annalisa is the genesis of my nickname, Mr. Modernism, as she is the original Ms. Modernism. Annalisa is a Sydney-based interior designer, design educator, architectural and design historian, preservationist, speaker, writer, and architecture photographer, with more than 25 years working in all sectors of design education in Australia and abroad. She's been a yearly presence at Modernism Week, as we hope to be, and she has a kick-ass modernist house designed by Russell Jack. Let's go poolside in Palm Springs. Every year, when I come to Palm Springs, the population of native Australians increases. And at the forefront of this movement is Annalisa Capurro, who is back with us, Ms. Modernism, my favorite guest. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, George. Well, it's fantastic to be back. How many years is it now?
I don't know.
It's like
it
a
seems like the
decade.
late 70s or
Is she
something.
like the blooming onion of Palm Springs?
Yes.
Do they even know what those are over there?
No, that's an American
No, we
invention.
don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're sorry.
I know that there's at least one group of 19 Australians here.
Yes, there are hundreds of us this year, as
Wow.
you said. Yes, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Australia is just looking towards Palm Springs for holidays, for good weather, when obviously we're having terrible, terrible fires and horrible summers. People are flocking here.
To
Because
California,
look at,
which also has terrible, terrible fires.
But not necessarily at this time of year.
Not this time of year.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So are they all staying sort of in different places around the valley, or do you guys get together,
Well,
have a big
yeah,
party?
we do actually get together, but people tend to congregate. They either get Airbnbs and they rent them out, or, you know, they stay in hotels and everything. So, yeah, there are big groups of us going around.
Yeah, it's fascinating to find out about these communities that are like, was it Beaumaris?
Beaumaris, yeah.
We learned about that recently.
Exactly. Like, that's the thing with Australia. You know, obviously, like the rest of the world, you know, we're sort of catching up to this idea of protecting and preserving buildings from the 50s, 60s and 70s because they've just been demolished in Australia like all other places in the world. So now there are a lot of grassroots communities, just like the Beaumaris group, that are, you know, that are getting together and realising we live in this amazing community which has exceptional architectural, you know, heritage, and it's just getting demolished. So people are getting together.
Beaumaris?
So Beaumaris is a seaside suburb of Melbourne, actually,
Okay.
where a number of architects of the 60s got together and they were, you know, building all of these houses.
Robin Boyd was one of the main ones there.
Exactly, yeah. So there's numerous areas like that in Australia in different cities, yeah. So it's just great to see that people are getting together. And now the thing is they're coming to Modernism Week and they're getting inspired because they see what's happening here and they can see that if you put on a few parties, you give people a few drinks, you know, you give people reason to dress up, what happens? Everyone gets excited. So then they all turn up. So that's what groups like that are starting to do. They're coming here, seeing what's happening at Modernism Week and then taking those ideas back, you know, admittedly on a smaller scale, but it's the same ideas. It's having people get together and making it fun, because you can't just stand there and give people academic lectures and tell them that these houses are important. People don't care, like who designed it or what year, but they care about
And they're
seeing...
only here because somebody cared enough to preserve it.
Exactly, yeah. So you've just got to make it fun. That's what I've learnt, you know. Preservation by appreciation. That's what I've been talking about for years, is make people love it and people will look after it themselves.
Preservation by alliteration. I love it.
Exactly.
That's our motto in North Carolina and in US Modernist, is you've got to make this stuff enjoyable. And it's interesting because, you know, I manage our magazine library now, which is up to 2.8 million pages of documents.
Can I just say, George, that is an extraordinary achievement. Like, you really are amazing. What you've done and documented and archived all of this information, it's such a massive resource for all of us.
Carpal tunnel syndrome from scanning all those magazines.
Yeah. It's been interesting because, you know, I get to read a little bit of them as I'm
just
scanning.
a little bit.
It seems like every 10 to 15 years, the architecture profession goes through this existential crisis of why doesn't the public love us more?
Exactly.
And this doesn't matter whether it's 1950, 65, 70, 95, 2005, because the answer they always come to, the conclusion they always reach after many, many meetings of very talented architects is, we must educate the public.
That's exactly right.
And so they go out and they educate the public a little bit, who really does not care to be educated in this way.
They just want to have fun. They want to enjoy buildings.
And then it falls apart until they have their next existential crisis. So, Annalisa, I think we're right on here with making it fun.
Exactly. It's very
Annalisa
important.
is one of the most fun people that I know. And I guess it was 5 years ago that I found out that she was using Ms. Modernism on Instagram. And so I went to her and asked her, is there a Mr. Modernism?
Oh, that's right. That was the birth of...
Yes.
Exactly, the birth
and
of
she
Mr.
said
Modernism.
no, and I asked her, well, could I use that? And she was very gracious and said yes.
Oh, of
and so,
course you can.
And so now
I'm honoured.
we are Mr. and Ms. Modernism. We need to do something one of these years.
Go on a honeymoon.
Exactly, go on a honeymoon.
Yeah,
That's it. Let's
around
go
the
to
world.
Columbus.
Yeah,
Let's go to Columbus. Yes.
Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Indiana.
Do something, do a lecture or do a talk or something.
Oh, I'll be in that,
We could
George.
sing, you know.
I
we
don't
could sing a few
sing,
things.
actually. I don't sing.
We could dance. Do you dance,
Maybe
Annalisa?
I could dance,
Okay.
yeah, but I
we could do
definitely
that.
don't sing.
But it has been delightful getting to know you, and you have been coming here how long now?
Oh, over a decade,
Yeah,
actually.
easily.
Yeah, totally. So it's
Because
been...
it's 15 years old, and you've been here 10 of those.
Yeah,
Definitely,
even
yeah.
10 years
Even-
ago, this
yeah.
was a much smaller event.
Oh, look, 25,000 people came the first time. that I was here. So, yeah, over a decade ago. And I just heard that this year they're looking at 200,000 people. Wow. I know, it's incredible. And look, I just fell in love with it like everybody else. And your next guest that's going to be on, Darren Bradley, was actually the first person that I actually saw when I arrived at Palm Springs 10 years ago. Yeah.
Oh.
So we've become very good friends since too. And then I met you, I don't know how many years, like
5 or 6 years ago. Yeah.
So that's what's amazing. It's just like coming home, you know. I come back and it's all these people that I see once a year and they've all got the same passions, and it's so wonderful to hear about what people are doing and their latest projects, and it's just we all inspire each other.
Yeah. Do you come with a new pair of sunglasses every year?
I do. A new outfit. I have numerous new outfits, new earrings.
Right.
Unfortunately,
it's too bad it's a podcast.
Exactly. You're
quite a vision in black and white.
Well, thank you very much.
Our staff now has taken to FedEx shipping their dresses and shoes here instead of dealing with suitcases.
The girls were telling me that, actually,
Yes.
at the ModCon party. They were saying that, and they took over your room, and they just
They've taken over everything
Yeah.
here. In fact, it was so hilarious. I come back, and they've gone to Home Depot and bought their own wardrobe rack for
my
the hotel
gosh.
room because it can't handle it.
Well, you just have to look. You cannot wear the same dress twice.
Right.
You have to have a different outfit for every day, and obviously you're at 3 parties every night as well. So you need, at least 4 or 5 outfits a day. So
Yeah.
I feel their pain. I have to bring it from Australia, so
Yeah.
that's a lot further
Yes,
to
you
ship.
should.
Believe
Right.
me.
Is there a cheap way to ship from Australia?
Yeah,
You can
on a
ship
boat.
It's incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Because we have FedEx Ground here, which is 5 slow days to most anywhere. So as long as you plan ahead, you can get it there. But
Wonderful.
I think country to country, it's a different story.
Oh, yeah. It's a big, big difference.
Annalisa, I wanted to ask, we've seen in the news this last year about the huge fires
Oh, yeah.
that have been going on
been
in
terrible.
Australia.
Yeah, some
on a
of them
scale
have.
that we can't even imagine.
Look, we couldn't even comprehend it, or we still can't comprehend it either. It was just, it was extraordinary. It was terrifying. It was scary. We got evacuated. As you know, I've got a significant mid-century house in Sydney, and it sits on a very, very dense bush block.
Yeah.
And we sort of had 2 fires in the 2 suburbs next to us, and they recommended that we all had to get out. And it's that thing that you always talk about hypothetically. What if I had 15 minutes? And I had to leave the house? What would I take? And it's just it's a terrifying experience. And look, we were really lucky that we got to go back to the house. But I've got so many friends that I know that have lost their houses, and literally it's just been devastating. It's been devastating for the wildlife. They think maybe a billion animals. It's incomprehensible.
Even wrap my head around
No,
that.
and they say that it could even be more because they can't even get in there, to see. And, I was reading that they were saying maybe the platypus is extinct now, and a third of the koala population's gone. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And then there's, thousands of people have lost their houses, and, people have died, lost their families, and it's beyond anything, It was like Armageddon, I'm going to say that. And living, in Sydney for 4 months with thick, black smoke permeating everywhere. And they say it's the same as smoking, 40 cigarettes a day, and they're thinking it's going to be this, incredible increase of lung cancer in the next decade because...
Right. And the smoke is stretching all the way around the globe.
Yeah, it literally went all the way around. In New Zealand, it was turning, the glaciers pink. Oh. And that's what was extraordinary is there was this eerie, pink light, this pink sort of golden light, which is something to do
particles
with
in
the
the air.
dust.
Yeah.
And look, it was just terrible.
It's like you're wearing rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
Look on the bright side.
It's very hard to see any brightness in that. Yeah. And then the crazy thing is, like here in California, literally the only thing that put the fires out is we had this massive flooding. And so then we've got all the erosion.
The
mudslides and oh my God, and people have lost power. I've had no power in our house for a week. You can't even just imagine, it's been horrendous. But look, here in California, people live with this. They live with fires now 365 days a year, which they're forecasting in Australia in the next, so many decades. That's what we'll be looking at, unfortunately. So,
I remember seeing in the news when the fires were going on in Australia, and I never was quite sure whether these were legit or not, but they were shots from space of Australia, and it looked like the whole southeast coast was lit up with light. Was that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
they're straight from the NASA space station.
Yeah.
It was something like, I think they were saying 2/3 of the country or something were impacted. And an article I just read 2 days ago said that 75% of the population in Australia were impacted by the fires. 75% of 20-something million people
it is
it's
inconceivable, isn't it? Because here, in California, we have wildfires that last anywhere from maybe 3 days to 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks tops. So the idea of this going on for months is just incredible.
Terrible.
Did you lose any significant modernist houses that you know of from the fires?
Not that I know of, because literally it's just happened before I got on the plane to come here.
That's the problem. Is that you may not really
that's
know
the thing. So I don't really know the full story.
Because we lost a Craig Elwood house here in California with the last big fire.
Terrible. Yeah, so no, I don't really know. That's the thing, because I got here and it'll be a matter of getting back and just finding out. But, I'm sure a lot of mid-century houses would have been lost, because especially on the south coast, there's a lot of, that beach house architecture, which, the 50s and 60s post-war people were the baby boom, and they were having second houses and building these houses, which were beachside shacks. So they were using modernist ideas because it was all about the landscape. It was all about connecting to nature. It was all about simplicity. Like these houses in Palm Springs were second homes. So that style of architecture was perfect for that. So there's an awful lot of those that are going to be lost.
It's the irony of modernist design being at one with nature.
Exactly.
Sometimes you don't want to be that close to that kind of nature.
Well, that's the thing. I just did a lecture yesterday, on my house, which is called the Jack House, very, significant house, 1957, designed by Russell Jack. He was he's still alive, actually. He's 94, still going strong, but he and his wife, she was also an architect, Pamela Jack, they built it as their family home in 1957. And it won the Sulman Award at the time, which was the highest accolade of architecture given by the Institute of Architects. But they bought this bush site, which was, really inexpensive at the time. They're a young couple with no money, post-war, and nobody wanted the site because it was a bush site, it was on a slope, and it had a creek running through it. And so, they were very inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, very inspired by his vision, his philosophy of organic architecture, which is, the building growing out of the landscape, like falling water. So they, again, place their house on the creek, like falling water is on the waterfall. And so the creek literally, runs under the house. And the house is surrounded by bush. And they pretty much moved no vegetation. They shaved, one rock. But it was that same idea of Frank Lloyd Wright that each building should be of that site, not something like we know international modernism where you can pick up a building and put it in Sydney, Melbourne, London. It's going to work. So this house is designed just for this site. And so, like you were saying, that's the thing, is it's wonderful living with nature because, you have the sun, you have ventilation, the house is beautifully oriented, and it's wonderful when it's all great. But, when you've got nature like that roaring up to your front door, it's terrifying.
You're doing a second talk coming up, which I love, called Ms. Modernism's Masterclass.
I am.
What is this about?
Well, for once, I'm putting on my other hat because I come here and I'm usually an architectural historian, and I'm talking about Australian, whether it's design, architecture, but this time I'm putting on my interior design hat because that was my first profession. So I'm actually giving a masterclass with Mark Davis. He's from Modern Home here in Palm Springs. He has the Modern Home Design Showroom. And so he's an expert in, materials of all sorts. He also owned the Keniston House, which was a very, very significant house in Rancho Mirage, which is the next little city from Palm Springs, designed by E. Stewart Williams, also in 1957. And he renovated that and restored that back, 15 years ago when there was nowhere in Palm Springs for him to get materials or anything to restore the house. So he came up with this idea of this one-stop shop, which is this showroom. So he went on and did lots of other restorations, and I've had nearly 30 years of of designing and restoring buildings. So the two of us are getting together and we're doing a design masterclass. So we've actually spent a lot of time here looking at renovations and restorations that people do. And often the thing is people don't have the knowledge to understand what materials are appropriate when you're actually dealing with mid-century houses. So we're giving a masterclass to basically give people an idea of, you don't just follow trend slavishly. You don't just choose what you like and put it into these houses. You try to look at the house, you look at the architect's original design intent, and you try to do something that's definitely contemporary, because replicating the past is never a good thing. Faux this, fake that, is something I'm very against as a designer. It's 2020 now. We need to design work that is of our time, just like the modernists were of their time,
Right.
but it needs to be sympathetic. You need to look at the elements and principles of the design, the materiality, and you need to use, new materials, but in a way that's sympathetic, that relates to, what that building's about.
So it's sort of a synthesis then.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to, I'm going to give a bit of a talk about, about coming up with a concept, a driving idea, because often I do see here a lot of people where every single bathroom has a different theme, every single bedroom has a different theme. And, that's wonderful if it's a Christopher Kennedy show house, but it's not so great if you're, modernist design's very holistic. It's
Yes.
usually about a limited materials palette. It's all about this idea of holistic, whether it's inside, outside, or it's about the interior and how all of those rooms connect and create this beautiful integrated whole. And that's what makes these buildings timeless, in these designs. So I'm giving a bit of a masterclass in design. So I'm very excited about that because obviously, design is my first love, and that's how I got into preservation, like a lot of us. So that's very exciting. So I'm looking forward to that.
Is there a graduation ceremony at the end?
Exactly. We're giving away certificates. We're giving away medals.
You're going to toss hats in the air?
That's it. Exactly.
I hope so.
Exactly. We will do that for sure. So so hopefully it could be the beginning of, a whole series of masterclasses. That's
That
what
would
I'm
be-
sort of
that
hoping.
would be extraordinary.
Yeah. So I can use my other skills because I think it's, good to tap into
Right. So
everything.
If the preservation thing doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's right. I've
you can
got a
fall
fallback. That's
Right.
exactly right.
Well, Annalisa, thank you so much for coming and spending some
thank
time with
you,
us again this year.
George. Yeah,
it's always great to see you. I'm sure I'll see you around more the rest of this week.
Exactly. And thank you so much. It's always an honour to be here. And as I said, you guys are just doing amazing stuff. So
Give our love to the continent.
I will.
Yeah.
All those kangaroos and koalas. They
Yeah.
need everyone's love. So please keep fundraising for us, guys.
George was just chatting with Ms. Modernism, Sydney, Australia's Annalisa Capurro. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned as we bring more shows from 2020's Modernism Week in Palm Springs. Hey, you want to hang out with us at the swanky U.S. Modernist compound at Modernism Week next year, February 2021? Email george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/US Modernist and by Angela Roll, your special agent for modernist houses, 919-995-0550. All right, George, take us out.
Visit USModernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 plus significant modernist houses, and access 2.8 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by me and Robinson Earl. Carrie Cesarino researches guests while juggling 2 children, a bowling ball, and a chainsaw, all while salsa dancing with husband Adam. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm George Smart, and are the stars out tonight? There's no Frank Sinatra tune that doesn't pair with a visit to Frank's pool in Palm Springs, something we are privileged to experience every year at Modernism Week. We'll be back soon with another All I Do Is Dream of You. As time goes by, I've got you under my skin edition of U.S. Modernist Radio. Cheers.
We're swinging.
We are.